Welcome to our second episode of the Superposition podcast. And we are here joined by Professor Nox Makunga and Asmaa Omer, and we want to welcome you into our homes. We're just going to be having a conversation talking about plants, science, and the feminine divine. Prof. Nox, please can you introduce yourself?
Well, as we've already heard, I'm Nox Makunga, and I am actually a botanist that focuses work on medicinal plants.
I am Asmaa Omer, and I'm a research student at Stellenbosch University, and I'm working in mathematical modeling, and I'm working on ecology, so it's like somehow a bit related to plants.
As a scientist who is studying plants, what is your relationship then with plants and with flora, especially as you're going through South Africa? There's so much always to be seen. What kind of relationship do you have with the plants?
Well, I love plants. I mean, they're really interesting because, they're stuck in one place. And so they honestly have to adapt to their unique microenvironments. And they're always being bombarded by so many things. So changing climates, there may be predators, temperatures may be high, all kinds of things are actually happening. And so I'm always fascinated by how they can easily adapt and change to these continuously changing environments. And very unique adaptations. Sometimes they make thorns to protect themselves, so that's a physical protection, but other times they actually make chemicals to be able to protect themselves from the same situation. So they may make thorns to physically protect themselves from predators, or else they may make chemicals to physically protect themselves from predators. So I think my relationship is always not looking at just how beautiful they are, but just trying to understand all the sort of intricate biochemical and biophysical things that are actually happening internally. That really fascinates me.
That kind of adaptation, when I hear you speaking about it, it sounds like evolution, like this evolutionary process of a plant.
Yeah.
What kind of time scale is that, if now I'm a plant, I'm going to go thorns, is that something you would see like over 5 years of Cape Town droughts, or is it
millions and millions of years for evolution? This is a very long time scale, but at the same time they are phenotypically plastic. So what does that really mean? That means that they're actually able to make changes to their chemistry, to their phenology at this moment. So for instance, there is a big drought, then they will adjust. They perceive the stress first, and then they'll actually adjust to try and alleviate the stress. Fynbos itself is meant to be able to handle long periods of drought, as well as water availability. So I think if the droughts are continuously going on for very long periods, the landscape of the plants that we see will ultimately change.
What you just said, or you talked about plants, I see you are so passionate, and just I'm wondering how you just find yourself actually looking for plants and studying them. Like, did you decide it from when you are at high school, or like when you just...
The irony is that my dad was a botanist. Even, I tried to not follow in the same path as he did. I come from an environment where I've grown to appreciate plants and how they contribute to actually our daily existence, because of a family that was aware of plants. I think people, though, generally are not plant aware. Most people are actually plant blind. There's a certain level of plant blindness in our society, and a undervalue of plants, where people don't even realize that the air that they breathe is there because of photosynthesis.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
crazy.
That is from the plant.
What is your take on genetically modified foods?
Well, I mean, I actually am trained as a plant molecular biologist, so I actually do some gene jockeying and gene modification.
Right.
So I don't necessarily have an opposition to it. I think there's a place for all kinds of different technologies, to be honest. And from my research, I actually use genetic modification as a means to alter secondary metabolism. And so if we can make these modifications, it actually provides you with a platform to be able to alter specialized metabolism and gain a deeper understanding of how it works. So we use this as a scientific tool to try and unravel the function and the regulation of secondary specialized metabolism.
Okay, what is secondary metabolism?
So primary metabolism, these are actually quite old terms now, but primary metabolism is regarded as basic metabolism such as photosynthesis. So
Okay.
the conversion of light energy to biochemical energy, that's photosynthesis.
Okay.
And I think most people have some idea of what that is. But that photosynthesis ultimately yields metabolites or chemicals which are then processed in more sophisticated or in other sophisticated biochemistry or biochemical pathways.
Mm-hmm.
And these metabolites yield metabolites that are not essential for growth and development, but that allow the plant to be able to survive in diverse environments and compete within diverse environments. So these are not necessary for primary growth, but they do allow for plants to be able to interact with the environment.
So when you do the modification, it's like triggering that metabolite
Those
to be,
pathways.
because usually it's something that won't be triggered unless the plant is like under some kind of stress or has
Yeah,
to.
absolutely. Often it's stress conditions, or it might be metabolites will accumulate in a particular tissue type or under specific environmental conditions, etc.
What metabolites are you working on right now?
Oh, I work on a few interesting ones such as mesembrine alkaloids, which are in a succulent plant called Scilentium. And these metabolites in animal systems are providing neuropsychiatric and neuropsychological effects. So they're pretty interesting. Yeah.
So, for me, I want just to take you a little bit back. So, I want to know somehow about your background. So, like for me, it's just really interesting to find a black scientist woman, and I just want to know in which circumstances you grow.
So I mentioned that my dad used to be a botanist, and so I suppose this triggered an interest in science. And I've always been fascinated by how the world works. Biochemistry has always kind of been a passion of mine. Always been interested in how do things actually function, and what does this function, how could we exploit this function? And I suppose that's what led me to become a scientist. I think all of us are quite curious about how things work, and this really honestly has kept me fascinated about life as a whole, and I presume those passions are amongst all of us, that curiosity. Right. Yeah. So that's been a main driver for me. I'm not sure about you ladies here. What's been, what turned you on to science?
It's a bit different than you, because in my community we have that girls, like, they don't usually talk. You have just to keep silent, and if it does come to, you know, go and study,
Uh-huh.
you have to ask for like permission for anything and everything that
Uh-huh.
you want to do. So for me, I just find myself, I just want to go out. I want to see what's happening exactly, and like why people like, I don't know. I see in TVs and in like, you know, um, in the news
Uh-huh.
about people they do such stuff. For me, is even I can't imagine it.
You've mentioned that you're breaking boundaries by actually doing this. And I think it takes a lot of guts, you know, it takes a lot of, you know, you're paving the way actually for a whole bunch of other ladies out there.
Yeah.
It's not an easy route to try and take, because you could become ostracized within your community. I had a very interesting conversation with a fellow collaborator of mine who happens to be Chinese, and she said to me that her parents were very worried about her not finding somebody to marry, because at
Wow.
the age of 30 you are regarded as a leftover, you know. So there are still many barriers in terms of gender stereotypes that we have to deal with as female scientists
Sure.
and researchers.
And you speak now about paving the way, and like that's one thing which Asmaa like definitely has that strength within her to be that woman who is willing to say, hey, look, like you can do this. This is possible.
Yeah, and also sometimes I think it's something related to your personality and how you just grow, like, you know, in your small family, and how much space actually they it's, you know, given to you to talk about yourself and to give your opinion. So in that case, you know, you will just, there is something that will grow and then led you to challenge yourself and also to just, you know, decide for yourself what you want to do and not just let others decide for you. And I'm saying by others, in Sudan, men. So like, you know,
Uh-huh.
and
It's
mostly
still
it's just related to men and family.
Uh-huh.
So if you want to take any step, first you have to check in your family and the men in your family.
Eesh, imagine, I could never, hey, my brother trying to tell me what I must.
So
what I
you
must
grow
make.
differently. So
Completely
even now
differently.
here, because
Yeah.
I'm growing in that world, if I want to do anything, I must call like my mother or someone in my family that, like, you know, I want to do that. And not just to, like, you know, to take permission, but, you know, in case of just letting them know that I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
I like the second one more, letting them know that I'm going to do it rather than asking for permission.
Being
Yeah.
dictated to about choices. I mean, I think this is one thing that my family was quite open-minded, was allowing us the space to follow whatever passions and aspirations that we really were keen for. I think my
It's
mom
really
would have
powerful.
liked to have had me do medicine, because at some stage she used to be a nurse. But in the end, she actually realized that she needed to just let that idea be. And I think after I got my PhD, she was like, okay,
It's
she's
all
a
good.
doctor anyways, so it's fine.
So in terms of paving the way, like how do you take on this? It's almost within the, you know, Black female South African scientists, there's almost this like onus and responsibility now to speak to young female scientists that may be interested in a similar avenue to you. And I can only imagine that that's like a lot, you know, it's a lot to take and a lot to take on for individuals that do occupy that space in the academic world and the scientific world. So how do you like handle that and the engagement that you have with your students and the students around you?
Well, I mean, I try and just be who I am, you know, just be me. I'm just Nox, and I think just the fact that I happen to be a Black female scientist that works at Stellenbosch University, which is regarded as a white Afrikaans environment, in itself really speaks volumes. And people really want to see people that look like themselves
100%.
in spaces
100%.
that are not necessarily historically ascribed or historically placed within their communities.
Yeah, for sure.
And I just try and be as natural and as, you know, and go about my business in the best possible way that I can. And hopefully that in itself will be inspiration for other people. I mean, I do engage in a lot of science communication, and I do a lot of public talks, as well as I write articles that are not necessarily within, you know, the rigor of, you know, the academic journals. Because I think we need to be seen, we need to be heard, our stories need to be told, and everybody has a story.
100.
I mean, even you, I mean, everybody has a story. And I think those stories really assist in inspiring other people and actually realizing, gee, man, I can do that, or I could do whatever I thought I wouldn't be able to do, and not limit myself. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm just thinking back to my undergraduate experience, and just the presence of a non-white female would have been a blessing. It really, just to see somebody that looked like me occupying that space, but it just wasn't present.
Even irrespective of color, just having somebody that happens to be female.
Yeah.
I mean, that in itself is inspirational. I think the appointment of Prof Setati as the Vice Chancellor at UCT, this has been big news, you know. And she's incredible and really inspiring, and she's, you know, continues to do research. She's in administration, she's on social media, and she's occupying all of these different spaces. And it is inspiring, and for me it's wonderful to see people in those roles, because I think, hey, you know, perhaps I could occupy that particular space if that's part of my aspirations.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I feel like as well in South Africa, which I'm sure is very different to Sudan, like where I am in my academic career, I feel very supported. Like I feel as though, you know, there's a lot of support at the moment within the scientific world to say, okay, cool, like you're interested in this, go and do it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that status quo is not necessarily going to, you know, prevail. So take these opportunities whilst they are there. I think often people fail to see opportunities that are actually in front of them. And if there's a low-hanging fruit, grab it, you know, go for it. And there is a lot of support currently actually for female researchers and female scientists and females in STEM, technology, engineering, mathematics. And what I think is interesting is that the National Research Foundation has actually been plowing a lot of money to encourage female scientists. And there's actually parity in terms of people that are doing PhDs and master's degrees in the biological sciences. What's interesting for me, even though the scholarships and the funding is available, when it comes to the physical sciences, particularly areas such as engineering and computer sciences, there are fewer white females taking on those scholarships and bursaries. I think you encourage young girls to realize that this is not just for boys. because I think we gender stereotype right from the beginning.
Yeah.
Lego sets, they won't be in the girls' aisle of toys, they'll be in the boys' aisle for toys. And these are small things, female Legos that actually happen to be in STEM jobs. It's a new thing. It's like in the last 5 years that you actually have pieces that are designed to engage girls. So we channel, our children right from the onset.
Yeah. So funny now, I'm thinking, for me, growing up, I never quite had that environment. It was all very fluid, there was lots of us.
Wonderful.
Very wonderful, honestly, like lots of climbing trees and running and all of that kind of stuff. Like, I'm helping my grandfather try and fix the car.
Well, absolutely, and that teaches you to think in a slightly different way.
Yeah. And so now I think, like, growing up, then one of the things that I struggled with this year, so I even had to ask, like, a mentor that I have, and he's male, and I just felt like, from what I was seeing, like, I just didn't have the power within me to perform to the extent that the men were performing around me. And I was just like, okay, is this true, or is this what other people see? So I had to ask him, like, hey, like, in your position, like, what do you see in terms of the female output and the male output? He gave a very political answer, but just that feeling in me that actually perhaps I can't do this as well as the man can. It was pretty crazy.
Yeah, and I mean, I think those moments of self-doubt, I think women probably reflect much more and possibly more deeply than males do. Guys are like, I can do this, even if they can't do it, they psychologically tell themselves that it is possible. They even say that when females negotiate a salary, they won't go outright and say, hey, this is what I need to be paid. They kind of think, oh, jeepers, you're giving me a job, thank you so much. So our interactions sometimes actually sort of hinder us. I'm sure you can do it. So it's just a matter of going out there and getting onto it and doing it. I think sometimes you have to adjust, as you go along. So you have to be flexible as well. And also give yourself the space of, okay, I'm feeling a little bit inferior about this particular thing, but look through and just think about the things that you should be feeling good about. I think often we don't count the things that really should be making us feel good.
Yeah, sure.
And that small thing that makes you feel bad about yourself overwhelms everything else and clouds everything else that's actually positive.
I'm just thinking about the community in South Africa, and I'm working as a mentor in high school, Kaimandi High School, and it's a black area, as you know. So I'm just wondering, because the students, they didn't now see which opportunity that, like, in front of their eyes. So I'm just curious about to know, is that related to the schools or to their families or to the community, or like why?
I think it's everything. Those answers are not simple. It's very complex. It is, all of those things are interlinked. So last year at the National Science Week, what was interesting for me, when I asked the young learners that were there if they knew anybody that was a scientist, I think there were two people that put up their hand out of a group of maybe 80 to 100 kids. And that just said to me that
There's a lack of information.
It's a lack of information. It's a lack of role models in the community, and the people that those two students said were scientists actually happened to be, the one said my uncle's a medical doctor. Obviously, that person did science. That's not somebody that's necessarily engaging in a research line.
Yeah.
In terms of science, they probably own their own practice and etc. So, and I actually went, okay, let's make that one student, perhaps. So they met a scientist for the first time last year, or they met a whole bunch of scientists actually for the first time last year. And often in certain communities, science is just not necessarily a career path. You don't know what is a scientist, what is it they do, how do they get money, how do you live, what kind of job that is. And like I said, it's a whole integrated social, economic, political, very complex issue.
So for me, I just want to say that those students, they have like potential to do like huge amount of work, or like in science or in any path, and they need that a little bit of pushing, and they need like people like you to go and visit them and see
well, thanks for saying that, but they also need people like you who actually go into those communities and see and actually uncover this potential.
I try to do that, and from whole bunch of school, I get 5 students who just really interested in doing.
Well, you know what? For me, anybody that you can engage, you've done exactly what you went there to do.
Yeah.
So last year there was one. I spoke for 35 minutes, and at this National Science Week, after I gave my talk, there was one guy, and he asked me, out of all the students that were there, the one question which was most relevant based on what I actually spoke about.
Oh, great.
And even though it was one person out of, say, 100, I was like, I managed to reach at least one person. So hopefully my 35 minutes made a difference.
Yeah.
And gave a new world perspective to that one person. That was more satisfying than probably the classes that I've been teaching, on campus. Because hopefully that young person will go and realize, my world is more than just the shacks that are actually in front of me every time I wake up. That there is a bigger world out there, and there are opportunities for me, and I can go out there and get them. So even if it's just one person, I think it makes a difference, and it was really satisfying for me from a psychological and emotional level. I left there feeling good about myself, actually.
And that also it will be like a cycle. So you manage to make difference in one person, but that one person also, I'm sure he will manage to do his own difference.
Yep.
Like in his own time.
It's like planting a seed. We started off this conversation about plants.
Yeah, and now we back
and
to
plants make more seeds, and
Yes.
so hopefully it will grow
Yeah.
the community of scientists, and particularly female scientists.
Sometimes you feel like you just want to plant a whole forest. Okay, so we started off with plants, so we're going to finish with plants. So we picked this up on the way over. Simply African indigenous herbs. Natural clean out, detox and antioxidant.
Sure.
And so we've got some ingredients here, and we want you to help us tell us scientifically what is good about these ingredients.
Oh my.
So we'll choose which ones.
Okay.
I'm going to try and pronounce them. Blue Blom Sali.
Bloblomsali.
Bloblomsali.
I'm probably also saying it wrong, but that's about as good as it gets. So this is actually a sage, a type of salvia, and salvias belong to a really, really big group. And what's interesting about this particular species is that it's got aromatic specialized metabolites or secondary metabolites, as well as metabolites that are not volatile. And so this is probably good for a variety of different things. You can use it for coughs and colds. You know, the aromatics have got chemicals such as mint and things like lemon, lemony flavors. And some people even would cook with that bloblomsali because, you know, like sage.
It's like a sage.
It's like a sage. It belongs to the same family and actually as those sages. There are a lot of different herbs there.
There are a lot. We don't have to go through all of them.
For sure.
Do you want to choose another one that might be interesting?
So let's go with buchu because it's supposed to be a detox mix. So buchu definitely has chemicals that are diuretics.
Okay.
So this will definitely pass through your kidneys. And it's probably one of the reasons it's actually included in that mix. So the bloblomsali, something that I didn't mention with the sages, is that it also has lots of antioxidants. And obviously antioxidants are good for us to balance out reactive oxygen species, which we all make. So yeah, any other one that you want me to?
Wild dacha.
Wild dacha, wilde dacha, Leonortis leonoris. I like saying that one.
Leonortis leonoris.
Leonortis leonoris. And the reason it's given that name is because of the flowers that happen to be a sort of, you can see that those are some of the floral parts that they included there.
This light orange.
So this dirty orange or dusty orange. And this looks like a lion's mane. And if you touch the flower, it's a little bit hairy, you know. So again, you know, that gives you that sort of Leo or lion thing.
Very fitting for you.
Very fitting for me. And